Hello and welcome back to the Our Gifted Kids podcast. We are here today to finish our conversation with Emily that we started last week as part of our Parents Guide to Gifted Kids First Years of School series. So if you remember last week, we talked to Emily, a mum of a gifted kid who is in this sort of period of those first years of school. So in last week's conversation, we were talking a lot about when should a gifted kid start school. Today we talk about where could a gifted kid go to school and what might our expectations be of that relationship with the school as a parent of a gifted kid. So a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much to Emily for joining us on the podcast and sharing her experience and opening up this whole series for everyone to enjoy. We'll be back later this week with our second episode in this series, which is with a lovely educator called Stephanie Higgs. So stay tuned for that episode later this week. And let's get stuck into it. Let's finish this conversation with Emily. So stay quirky. See you soon. Bye. Hi, I'm Sophia Elliott. As a parent of 3 gifted kids, I'm here to talk about all things gifted. Because I've been isolated and uncertain, and I felt like that parent. Then I found peace of mind, support, and my community. This podcast is about sharing that journey, actually parenting gifted kids, and connecting with advice and support. So we have everything we need for every member of our family to thrive. This is the Our Gifted Kid podcast. And we've already talked briefly, one of our other questions was, well, where do we send our kids to school? And the answer to that, again, is not simple. Sorry, it sucks to be a parent of a gifted kid. So basically, when it comes to education, right, either we do it or someone else does it. And if someone else is doing it, it's basically a state-based school or a private school. First of all, many gifted and twice exceptional kids and parents and families do choose to homeschool. And often because things have gone wrong, they can't find a place where their needs are adequately being met, and for all sorts of reasons. But it is a very relatively common path for people within our community to go down. And I remember thinking, oh my God, am I going to have to homeschool? I feel very grateful that I didn't. I think it would have been fun for a term. I don't know. My hat's off to anyone who homeschools. Like, seriously, it's amazing. Like, I see how it could be really fun, but then I also see how, I'm like, no. Anyway, moving on from homeschooling. If you're looking at schools, so it's basically state or private. And so the question is, what's better for gifted, right? Because it would be nice just to go, oh, this one's better or that one's better. But the truth is, you can't divide them that way. So sorry. I know that sucks not just to have a solid answer. So unfortunately, it's not as simple as saying go state or go private and you'll find a good school, because it just doesn't work that way. There's no guarantees in either camp. A good school often comes down to the leadership, unfortunately, although sometimes it can be helpful to know that if you get a good sense of where the principal stands in terms of gifted education, you'll at least get a sense of what you're going to either have to work with or to fight against. The principal who says we have children with many gifts, that's going to be a constant battle. The principal who says, well, my daughter actually did early entry, you go, I've got something to work with there. And a principal who actually says, oh, well, I've got a qualification, or we've got X teachers who have qualifications in gifted ed, and here's our gifted program, bingo, right? And that could be state, it could be private. I know people who have been to very expensive private schools, and that is unfortunately no guarantee that your gifted child will get their needs met and not just broken, which was their experience. So it's not even as easy to say if you spend a lot of money, you'll get what you want, because that's not even a guarantee. It's just tricky. And it's just that hard work of having to visit the schools. And like you said, get a sense of, is it safe to talk about this with this principal? And I think the reality is most parents will share the same experience as you and be like desperately wanting just to go, right, my kid's gifted. yay or nay, like, just let's just cut to the chase here, but not feeling like we can be that upfront and looking for clues as to how much we can divulge and what kind of a conversation we can have. But not easy, right?
Yeah, no, it's definitely tricky trying to, yeah, navigate all of that. And I think at the beginning of the year for us, we did think it was as simple as, do we go to our locally zoned government school, which we could walk to,
Mhm,
or a local private school, which we could also walk to? And that we thought that was as simple as that. They were the two choices. Um,
mm.
and then suddenly we were considering relocating, and just anything became an option, but you're also doing logistics and working. How are you supposed to do drop offs and pickups whilst working and everything else? So it kind of, yeah, felt like our whole life was kind of thrown up in the air and everything was an option, but then so many options were taken away as well. And I think for us as well, like after I did meet with that school and that principal, and I was like, okay, I think I've got a good option here. I then decided to call, like phone call without saying who I was, basically all of the schools local to us that were logistically viable, and just be upfront and actually speak to them and say, hey, my child's gifted. Do you have experiences with this? What's your understanding of it? And some of the conversations where you could tell that they wanted to understand, but they didn't. One school was like, oh, the way you're describing your child sounds like they've got pretty unique needs. And I was kind of like, I haven't described anything about my child. I haven't said anything. And so, it was kind of, they were already putting him in the too hard basket. And then there was one school that I spoke to who was so amazing. I was probably on the phone to them for about 40 minutes. They were full. They didn't have any capacity for next year's enrollments, but they still spoke to me and they got it. And they suggested other schools that would be good options, but we would, need to relocate for them. But it was just so comforting to be able to have just that one conversation with somebody who got it, who talked to me about what to expect, who talked to me about just, I guess, just to know that there were options out there. And I know, like, obviously you say that we're ahead of the game in terms of, well, he's 4 and he's been identified as being gifted. But I wish that, I wish we knew when
Yeah,
he was 2 so that he was on the
yeah.
list for that school.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I think it was still really good to call back all of those schools and just have those conversations and sort of leave no stone unturned.
Yeah, and well done for doing that because the truth is, as difficult as it is, as parents, we need to be that parent. The conversation we need to have with these principals is literally like, my kid is gifted. Here's a report. I'm not making it up. Here's a report. What how can you meet their needs? Who here has qualifications in gifted ed? Tell me about your gifted program. What kind of acceleration do you do? What kind of enrichment do you do? These are the kinds of questions that are completely reasonable to ask. And one of the reasons I've referred to that AEGT article is because it actually validates that, which is really nice. I'm like, oh, that's a really nice article. And it even sort of says, actually, I've got it here. So it says schools, preschools, and educators should continually provide challenge as a part of an appropriate and stimulating curriculum, gain the skills and knowledge to create optimal and flexible learning environments, create a learning environment where a child's potential, talent, and natural abilities allow themselves to be revealed, recognize a child's strengths and interests, respond to the readiness of learners, foster curiosity, creativity, imagination, and perseverance, and extend a child's thinking. Like, they should do all these things, and it's really sad that they don't in many cases, just lack that expertise in this particular area. And so, therefore, it's completely reasonable as a parent to be able to go, "My kid is gifted. What is your program? Who in the school is qualified?" And yet it's so hard to do. It's just such a hard conversation to have at the same time. So I think it's wonderful that you went back and did it over the phone where you felt like you had a bit of cover and the ability
Yeah.
just to kind of tell it how it was. Like, and that's the thing, it's like do it any way that you can and need to do these things. But this is the work that we need to do as parents. And I'm so pleased that you did find a school that was able to validate that for you? Because they are out there, and, like, we can be very doom and gloom, and I don't ever want to be because they are out there, but it's just harder to find them.
Yeah, I think, yeah, when you just having that one conversation was just really validating as a parent, especially like just sort of this whole thing being still very new to us.
Mm.
It's like, no, I didn't make all this up. Like, I'm not being crazy. I'm not asking for too much. And like this person that I spoke to was basically like, you might need to consider moving house. I was just like, oh my gosh, like, this is all overwhelming enough. So I think that's where we
Yeah,
kind of came to the decision of, all right, we'll start with prep,
yeah,
learn what we need to learn from that
yeah.
experience. And then if we need to consider relocating, at least we'll know what we're relocating for, because I sort of also don't necessarily think that, you know, one school that caters to gifted children is the school for all gifted children. So I feel like they're probably all different as well. So I kind of want to have more of an understanding of his individual needs and how he goes, and then find a school that's going to meet those needs specifically, not just like an umbrella of gifted, if I even find that anyway. So yeah, I think the next year is just kind of going to be another, input of information to inform our decisions, for the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's a great idea because we can get very caught up in parents and feeling like we need to solve the problem immediately. Like, it's need to do it now, this week, today. And it's like this journey with our kids is the long game, and in as much as there are times where we need to take action and make things happen, it's also okay just to take a big deep breath and consider the options. And the reality is, like many families do end up moving to access different schools, and that's a huge thing for a family, and not something many families have to do because like there is a school 5 minutes from here where I'm living that we don't get to go. We drive past every day and drive another 30 minutes to get to the school that meets the needs of our kids, and unfortunately, that's a very common experience for families of gifted kids.
Love what you're learning from the Our Gifted Kids podcast? Why not become a supporter? The quickest way to do this is to leave a review. There's no need for an essay, 5 stars will do. You can also say thanks with a one off tip in the tip jar or become a regular supporter for as little as the price of a coffee per month. There are lots of different ways you can say thanks. Check out the link in the show notes or head to www.ourgiftedkids.com to find out how you can help.
But that can lead us on to what are our expectations that we might have of a school. So we find the school, we've decided when they should start, we found a school, we're giving it a bash. What might our expectations be? And generally speaking, I'll refer back to our levels of giftedness because, again, it depends on the kids and kind of where they're at and what they're needing, but generally speaking, gifted kids need acceleration of some kind, right up to our profoundly gifted kids who need this sort of radical acceleration. Differentiation should be a part of any class. And that's where the teacher, is teaching, one particular subject matter, but is able to differentiate that to allow for all of the different learners within that space. But unfortunately, what shows us is teachers can be differentiating from anywhere from like 6 to 12 different levels within one class. And that's extreme. Like our teachers are people desperately trying to do their best, do not get informed about gifted education in their undergrads. And so, generally speaking, very few universities will actually teach teachers about gifted kids. So they're already starting, at a loss to help these kids. And so you need to specifically do like a graduate certificate or a master's in gifted education. So it's not a great base. And the at the very least, what your expectations are is an openness or a willingness. For example, one of my children's went to a kindergarten. I was very upfront because I had to be about where we were at and what we needed. And they were very upfront and said, well, we're not really across the gifted thing, but we're up for learning about it, and we're really up for meeting your child's needs. And true to their word, they did. We had this amazing year where that child was supported beautifully. And so at the very least, you need people who are willing to work with you and have that approach where we're building that community around the child, the student, and working together. And when it comes to being that parent advocating, unfortunately, as a parent of a gifted kid, it is our job to advocate during their whole entire schooling experience. It's probably something that we'll always need to do through that whole journey because they just don't fit in that box. And it really sucks to be in that situation for the child and, for the family as well. And it just does make it harder. And I think it's important to validate how tricky that is, how much energy and time and emotion goes into that, especially when you are bashing your head against a brick wall. But even just navigating things with, educators who are on board, it can still be tricky because our kids are really complicated little people. But a basic expectation is, what is your gifted program? In what ways do you currently accelerate students? I'd be like, give me examples of what you're doing now. Because there will be, there's gifted kids everywhere. And, and who do you have that's qualified? And getting a real sense that the leadership is on board. Because so often you'll get a good teacher, but you might only get that teacher for a year. And that teacher can only do as much as they're allowed to do from the leadership. So it's really important that leadership is on board and knowledgeable about giftedness. Otherwise, it almost doesn't matter how great the teacher is. If they're trying to accelerate or whatever, they're going to hit a brick wall as well. And some schools do composite classes and things like that. And I just think any opportunity where a gifted child has that chance to work at a higher level where they're needing to be met are things to consider, because sometimes we've kind of got to work with what we've got. But ultimately, I think everyone wants a learning environment where our kids are excited about learning, where they thrive, where they can be themselves, ask questions. Lots of gifted kids just get told not to ask so many questions. Put your hand down. Do you know?
Yeah. I think that's kind of hit the nail on the head, I guess, with one of my big fears. And we were leaving the parent information night at the end of the year, and my partner was like, you seem worried. Like, what are you worried about? And I had this realization that my biggest fear of my son starting school is that he's going to lose his love for learning. And I thought that was just so scary. But, I think that you send your child to school to learn, and then to have this perspective of, I've already got a child that loves to learn, but I'm worried that you guys are going to destroy that. And yeah, I think that was just really, I don't know, concerning to have that realization that was sort of my thought process. And it is things like, he does like to speak out, he does like to ask questions, and he's such, he loves to be a good kid, loves to help, loves to, be involved. But sometimes he does things that might feel like he gets in trouble for, he's not necessarily done the right thing. So if he is, if he does speak out, if a book's being read or something like that, and if he gets told off for that, that's a massive trigger. And he just, will get really sad. Depending on what the environment is, it might turn into a meltdown. He might be the naughty kid, so he feels like he's been in trouble. So then he becomes naughty, and then he continues to get in trouble. So those are the sort of situations that I'm worried about. It's like if he does interrupt during a story or something like that, and we'll work with him obviously to make sure that he, understands, I guess, the way of a classroom and things like that as much as we can. But if he does interrupt, don't tell him off. Just say to him, let's talk about it after. He would happily accept that, Don't say shush, just say, let's chat about it after. Let's catch up at recess, or, that sounds great. Let's talk later. And that would just, you'd see the difference in his response just by the way that you're framing that. And he's still not getting his way. He's still not talking over the top of you or interrupting the class, but it's just framing it in a way that isn't discouraging or telling him off. when he's not trying to be naughty. So yeah, I just want him to come out of the school year still loving to learn and having
Yeah.
learned something. So I think ultimately that's what he wants to do as well.
And I think that's a really hard thing because they're like, "Woo, we're up to school, I'm gonna learn, it's gonna be awesome." And then you're just like, "Oh, please be awesome." And your gifted kids are so sensitive and generally have a really great awareness. And so those things really do affect them. And they want to be good kids, do you know? It's like because they're so excited about learning. Unfortunately, research shows us that gifted kids can spend as much as 80% of a school year without learning, which is pretty tragic. Yeah, that's a downer. Moving on. Okay, what I will say as encouragement is, do you know, the very reason we're having this conversation is that it's really hard as a parent to navigate your way through these for our kids because it's really tricky. And even when that spark does get doused with a bucket of water, it's always there. It's who they are. And as parents, if you know, it's up to us to notice when that flame is under threat because it's always going to be there. And if we can take action and find a place that will light it up again, it will light up again. Do you know? It's kind of like the truth is the threat is real, but it can always be relit, you know? And it's like, yeah, I just think it's about, I think, having that confidence as a parent to trust your gut and keep an eye on things and, not, like drive yourself crazy, stressful kind of way, but just, yeah, and make those decisions when we can. And then, when I was thinking about it, I was sort of like, what are the things that I've learned that I would tell parents if I wanted to know, do you know? And I think it's very much trust your gut, your own intuition as a parent especially in how you feel your child is going and be having those conversations, be that parent about how they're going at school and also have confidence that even the research shows us that parents are actually better at identifying giftedness in their kids than teachers. We get it as parents. We're like, so that's not right here. And this ticks all the boxes, and also gather that community of support around you, the professionals that are going to help, who get gifted and who are going to help build you as a parent and your child up. So it might be the psychologists, the OTs, that whoever it is you need. And there are also even really great online forums like Sam Young and his Young Scholars Academy, or Dr. Dan doing his biochemistry for kids, stuff like that, where our gifted kids can actually get that cognitive need met in other ways, but also see themselves in other kids. So that sense of I'm not alone, because it's incredibly important to get that sense of seeing themselves in others. So even on that note, getting in touch with your state association, or even sometimes Mensa will do social things for kids. Sometimes they don't. Associations, everything can be hit and miss if it's run by volunteers, because volunteers do so much. But reaching out to whatever organizations are nearby to try and get those social opportunities for your kids to meet other gifted kids is really
Yeah.
important and can really get them through. And be prepared to know, have the confidence to know that you may know more about giftedness than the school or teacher that you're talking to, which is a scary thought because you really want them to know it all. But unfortunately, as I said, they're just not trained. It's not the teacher's fault. The system really hasn't done the right thing by gifted kids in that respect yet. It really needs to be a part of every undergrad, in my opinion. So be prepared to make that call, potentially move schools, keeping an eye on those first years for changes in behavior. We've talked a lot about the red flags, ideally before it spirals into like mental health issues or burnout. And I'll put a link to, there's a great Davidson article on gifted kid burnout, which basically is the more energy a kid has to put into getting through the day in an educational environment that is not a good match, the more, that takes that energy away from them, and then they can eventually burn out because what they're needing is a good educational fit. And
I think I was going to say as well, just in
yeah.
terms of that sort of sense of belonging, that's always just sort of been ingrained in me to make sure that sort of everyone feels like they belong somewhere.
Mm,
I don't think you're going to belong everywhere, but you need to have
mm,
somewhere that you do feel like you
yeah.
belong. And so we, as part of sort of our research throughout the year, well, and the months really over the middle of the year, we did find a gifted program that supplements school. So we started him in that at the end of 2022 for term 4. And that has been amazing for him to be around other gifted children. But also for me, because when I'm doing the drop-offs and pickups, I'm around other parents of gifted children.
Mhm.
So we can all just talk freely and just, you know, just talk about what it's like and talk about what we're experiencing. And then he's been accepted into that program again for 2023. So at least I guess that will break up the school week for him. So sort of one day a week, he won't be at school. He'll be at this other program. It's not counted as an absence, it's like an educational program. So, and it's, logistically, it's a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, I just feel like that if we do end up in a path where the school isn't meeting his needs, I'm hoping that at least one day a week, and like I say, he's gifted all the time. It's not just some of the time, but
Mm,
I just hope that that one day a week does give him a sense of feeling normal and feeling
mhm.
and around other kids who he can engage with on his level.
Yeah.
So,
And
there are options out there, I guess. There's not a
yeah,
lot and they're hard
yeah,
to find, but, we found one.
yeah. And so that was Born to Soar.
Born to Soar,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, and in Melbourne.
Yeah, so they're in Melbourne and I think in New South Wales as well.
Yeah, I think they're in Sydney as well.
Yeah.
I've come across them, so it's really nice to hear that been a great experience for you. Other parents might like to check that out as well, because there's not a lot, but they are out there. And it's about finding out what you've got locally, what your options are. And that's a really great solution, because guaranteed once a week he's getting his cup full, and that can make a really big difference. He's seeing other kids that are like him. He's being met on the level, and that's just what our kids need, in whatever way we can kind of pull that together as much as we can. And it's nice to have parents in your life that get that, you know, you're not being a pushy parent, putting him in this random program because you're trying to hothouse them or something. It's like, no, no, no. They're running off and we're just trying to keep up as parents, we're just trying to support them and what they need. And it's nice to just be around other parents who get that, that it's
Yeah.
actually, you're just trying to support them, but they're leading the charge on how much they want to learn and how engaged they are with just consuming knowledge.
And I think one thing that sort of we've like a few of the parents that I've talked about is that I guess this perception that I guess parents of gifted children want, that they're pushing their children to become geniuses or something like
Yeah.
that. And we've kind of all agreed that we don't want, that's not necessarily what we want for our children. We want them to be happy. And that's, you know, that's ultimately what we're sort of doing all of this for. That's what we're doing all the research for, instead of, driving around to these programs and all
Mhm.
that sort of thing. And I think that before we started our gifted journey with him, we didn't have any of those concerns. We thought that, you just send him to school and he would just grow up to be a happy kid. And now it's changed a little bit, and just, yeah, sort of really finding what does make him happy and making sure that, that the school environment does keep him, yeah, just keep him happy. I don't care if if he's a genius at the end of it.
Mhm.
Just happy. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like, personally, for my own kids, I don't care what they do in life. I want them to be confident. I want them to get to the other side of school without being traumatized by it. I want them to be doing something they love because they've been on this journey with people around them who also love it. And, and I think when you get into that gifted community where we all kind of get the challenges that come with this learning, it's very sobering, and you get that perspective of actually this is just really about it's all about the social and emotional, because they've got the brain to kind of do whatever they want to put their mind to. So it really does become all about that social emotional piece. Yeah. I always think that you really know that you're with like-minded parents when when that's the value set, because I think it demonstrates that parent sense of, given the struggles and challenges that go with this, actually all I really want is a happy kid. Because it what people don't realize is there are the pros and cons of being gifted. It's not, it's actually quite a challenging journey. And at the end of the day, it's really just about, yeah, seeing them onto this path to adulthood doing something that they love, hopefully, whatever that might end up being. So I don't know. We've talked a lot. I feel like I've talked a lot. Hopefully, I haven't bored you and answered some questions and just kind of things to I don't know, think about and look out for, because it is incredibly important. And that was one of the other questions. And why is it so important? Like, and I think that just harks back to the fact that they're gifted from day dot. They need these accommodations through their whole educational journey. Their sense of self, who they are in the world, seeing other people like them. It's a really important. It just it's kind of like finding that it can change the trajectory of a kid's life, is actually what I've seen. Finding that right educational fit for a gifted kid, which is so challenging, but it can be as big as changing that trajectory. And it's incredibly important. And we have these conversations, I think, to validate how challenging it is for parents who listen, but also hopefully it's the educators and policymakers can start to get a sense of what's at stake and what the challenges are, and that we're dealing with real people and real kids and real families. And we shouldn't have to talk about moving house to access a school, the only or one of the few options that we might have to meet the educational needs of our kids and things like that. It's a lot. So I don't know. I hope that this conversation has helped anyone at that part of the journey. I often get to the end of the podcast, I'm like, oh, what did I just say? I don't know. I hope I said something useful.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I found it really overwhelming at the beginning, but I think, generally, if a task is overwhelming, you break it down into smaller chunks. And for me, just focusing on prep. So rather than being like,
Yes.
what's my son's schooling journey going to be like for the next 12 years? This is such a big decision. Is he going to, he's going to be in puberty and he's going to be one of the youngest, all these sort of things. It's like,
Yeah.
prep, let's deal with prep. And I don't know what's going to happen, but we're just dealing with prep and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Do you know, and I think that's a brilliant approach. And I think I've probably taken a similar one myself. It's like, what's just the next right step, and also I think when your kids find their peers, like their gifted peers, whatever that journey is, kind of becomes the norm. So those things that people can get very wound up about, oh, if we accelerate now, they'll be younger then, and and it's kind of like, well, if they know enough other gifted kids, that's going to be a norm, whether they're at school or they know through programs or whatever. So it's about shifting our perspective, I think, around norms as well. And it's kind of like, and it'll be okay. Like, it will be okay. It's tricky, but we can get through this. We're not alone. There's actually lots of families going through this process. And 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 the more that we support each other and talk about these issues and help each other find the helpers out there and the support, networks like Born to Soar and our gifted and talented associations and places like that, then we can kind of get through this journey together. So thank you so much for reaching out with these questions, coming on the podcast, even though it can be a bit scary. And thank you for staying up late with me. I've just realized the time. and having this chat with me. I've really appreciated it.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
If you enjoyed this episode and it inspired you in some way, I'd love to hear about your biggest takeaway in the comments. For more episodes, you can subscribe, and to help others find our podcast, please leave a review. You can find show notes and more resources at ourgiftedkids.com, and connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. See you in the same place next week.